One of the themes that we have for today, the whole weekend, is spiritual discipline. And the exemplars of spiritual discipline are you, because you're here for the 8:30 session. It's not so easy to get up in the morning and come to the first session. Traditionally, people say, I think I'll go to the second session. So thank you for coming to our session today. We have true exemplars of Gandhian and Kingian nonviolence on our panel. I'm very honored to be the moderator. My name is Jonathan Greenberg. I'm the Senior Associate Director and Scholar in Residence at the Institute for Nonviolence and Social Justice at the University of San Francisco. And I'm very honored to be with my friends and colleagues on the panel for this session. As you've met Prasad Gollanapalli yesterday, who is a very prominent Indian Gandhian and the senior director of the Gandhi-King Foundation in India, and someone who worked as a partner with Dr. Clay Carson to plan this entire event. So we're honored to have Prasad coming from India, and also from India. Is it a little bit of an echo on my voice? Yeah, is it possible to? Okay, good. So we also have Professor Gauri Mahulikar.
Namaste.
Mahulikar.
Mahulikar.
And Professor Mahulikar is also coming here directly from India. And you will get a chance to learn from her with her deep background in the origins in Indian spiritual traditions of the concepts that later became adopted by Gandhi and then later by King. And we have with us Michael Nagler. Michael is very well known to people in the United States in the nonviolence community. He taught for many years at UC Berkeley. He was the founder of the Peace and Conflict Studies program at Berkeley, which was a pioneering program and still is. And Michael's also the founder of the Metta Center for Nonviolence, very prominent thinker and practitioner of nonviolence. The theme of today's first session is nonviolence in theory and practice, and we have really wonderful guests to talk about that topic. And it's framed specifically with attention to the concept of Satyagraha. Satyagraha, we're going to learn a lot more from our first speaker, Professor Mahulikar, about the origins of that term. But it's really incredible that a concept that's, as you will learn, ancient and deep in the Indian tradition, not only transformed India and the world, but transformed the United States and became adopted as the core mobilizing principle of the Kingian version of nonviolence. So Satyagraha in theory and practice, and the subtitle is Internationalizing and Institutionalizing Nonviolence. That subtitle was very specifically chosen for a panelist who ended up not being able to come, and that was Dr. Bernard Lafayette. So Dr. Lafayette was one of Martin Luther King Jr.'s really key deputies and allies and colleagues. He came through the student movement and through SNCC and ended up working very closely with Dr. King, and is still one of the most prominent teachers and practitioners of nonviolence in the United States. And Bernard Lafayette tells a story that he was with King in April 1968. I'm not sure if he saw him on April 4th or April 3rd. I think he saw him on April 4th. And Dr. Lafayette said that the last words that Dr. King said to him were, the next step is to internationalize and institutionalize nonviolence. So we're going to come back to that at the end. of our discussion today. I wanted to briefly, for 10 minutes, and then we'll jump into everyone's discussion, kind of outline the bridge between the African American liberation, freedom struggle, dating back to abolitionism and the civil disobedience and the abolitionist movement, all the way to Gandhianism and Gandhi in the US struggle. The bridge is Martin Luther King Jr., but actually, to set the historical record, it didn't start with Martin Luther King Jr. He comes through a lineage of African American nonviolence, civil rights, and black freedom leaders who were attracted to Gandhi, who eventually brought Gandhi to King. And I just want to outline that extremely briefly so you have the historical setting. So there's a number of people who were very important. One of them was Howard Thurman. Actually, 3 theologians, Howard Thurman, the great professor and theologian who ended up coming to San Francisco to create the first multiracial congregation because of his deep commitments. Benjamin Mays and Mordecai Johnson. These were very influential people for Dr. King, and they were all deeply influenced by Gandhi, and they were part of the vehicle that brought Gandhi to King. Howard Thurman went to India in February 1936 to meet Gandhi because of his fascination with Gandhi. And he had an intensive dialogue directly with Gandhi in which they discussed the role of nonviolence and how it could be applied to the African American freedom struggle. Gandhi felt extremely strongly that there was a direct, powerful application of that Satyagraha philosophy in practice that could be applied with strong success in the United States for overcoming Jim Crow. And Thurman questioned him about that. He asked him, is nonviolence, from your point of view, a form of direct action? Gandhi said it's not one form, it's the only form. Gandhi told Thurman that nonviolence, Satyagraha, was a force that was a physical force. It was more than an idea. It was more powerful than electricity. It's part of the law of nature, superior to all other forces, and that it could be the most transformative power and force that could be harnessed by the African American freedom movement. Later, Benjamin Mays, who was the president of Morehouse College, and again, for background, the black freedom movement from emancipation and the Freedmen's Bureau, one of the things that it led to was the creation of the historically black colleges and universities, among them Morehouse College, where Dr. King went. Benjamin Mays was president of Morehouse College. He also went to meet with Gandhi. He also came back completely transformed by this meeting with Gandhi, and that was the first time that Dr. King had ever really studied or heard about Gandhi, was from Benjamin Mays. And then Mordecai Johnson was president of Howard University, another part of this tradition, who spoke of his trip to visit Gandhi to Dr. King. And eventually, Dr. King began to see that Jesus Christ and Christianity was the spiritual path that was his tradition, but that Gandhi augmented that path through a method of transforming love into power and social transformation and social change. Then later, there were, of course, other very important people who were part of the connection between Gandhi and King. One is Bayard Rustin, who was deeply committed to nonviolence. And part of the transformation with King was first the intellectual through his studies, and then political, starting to incorporate these ideas, beginning in the Montgomery bus boycott, and then personal. One of the personal aspects was Bayard Rustin, because early on, Dr. King had armed security to protect him. You know, he was bombed multiple times, including in Montgomery. But Bayard Rustin convinced him that if you're going to be committed to Gandhi principles of nonviolence, you have to live it in a deeply personal way. So that was, and then from then on, he didn't have people who had guns around him. So it was all three elements, the political, the intellectual, and the spiritual and personal. And then finally, Reverend James Lawson, who's speaking today. Reverend Lawson was such an important person who came to India later, after Gandhi was killed, immersed himself in the study of Gandhi, and came back and really became a key, not only a key instructor and counselor to King, but also, of course, as you know, in Nashville to many of the students, James Bevel, Congressman, who later became Congressman John Lewis, Bernard Lafayette, Diane Nash. He became the most important trainer in nonviolence from this tradition. So by the time it got to King, there already had been this powerful lineage, and then King incorporated it very deeply and powerfully throughout his, and increasingly so, throughout his ministry and throughout his political life. So I wanted to sort of set the stage a little bit for the context of how the Gandhian tradition didn't just suddenly appear with Dr. King, but it became so deeply merged in this, the combination of the Christian tradition and the Gandhian tradition. And Dr. King saw the Gandhian tradition as providing the method that could realize the values of the Christian tradition that he came from. So with that background, I'd like to introduce, as I mentioned, Gauri Mahulikar, to step back and help us understand from her studies of Sanskrit and the Indian spiritual traditions where these concepts came from, the origins of these ideas that later became amazingly impactful to this day. Thank you.
Thank you. Hari Om, and a very good morning to all of you here. At the very outset, I am grateful and I express my deep thanks to the organizers of this Gandhi-King conference for giving me an opportunity to speak, and especially the moderator of this panel, Jonathan, for making it clear that because I am a Sanskrit student and a Sanskrit professor, he asked me to deeply study the word Satyagraha, and give the etymology of the word so that the meaning becomes quite clear. So let me start doing that. Satyagraha is a compound word. It is called samasa in Sanskrit. Samasa is a combination of two or more words. So here there are two words, Satya and Agraha. Satya is truth. Satya, in a lexicon called Amarakosha, it is called Sate Hitam. Hitam is beneficial, that which is beneficial as it exists. Satya is also derived from the root us to be, to exist. And therefore that which exists, that is called Satya. There is another term which is like Satya, which is called Rita. It's a Vedic word, Rita. But there is a slight difference in Rita and Satya. Rita is a flexible truth. It's a truth in flux, that which is changing, that is called Rita. From that we have the word Ritu, the season, which keep on changing, So Ritu, Ru Gatau, that is the Gatyarthaka dhatu. So Satya is that which is universal, that is unchangeable, whereas Rita is that which changes according to time and space, and it is subject to the person. So Sthala, Kala and Vyakti Sapeksha, relativity. So there is, Rita is a relative truth, whereas Satya is the final, ultimate, universal truth. So that is regarding the word Satya, okay? Now when we come to the word Agraha, A is a prefix called Upasarga, and Graha is a root, a verb, which means to hold on. Graha Grannhati, to seize, to hold on, to capture. Okay? So Agraha, A iti arvagarte. Hold it to yourself. Hold it for you. So Agraha is anything which is done with asakti. That is, with clinging to that, emphasizing on that. So that is the meaning of Agraha. Now when we combine these two words, Satya and Agraha, it is holding on to truth. Again, Sanskrit being a very, very interesting language, Satyagraha, the compounded word, can be split in two ways. It could be Satyasya Agraha or Satyaya Agraha. Satyasya Agraha is holding on the truth, and Satyaya holding on something for the sake of truth. Okay? So these are the two connotations of the dissolution of the compound Satyagraha. Satyasya Agraha, holding on the truth, and Satyaya, holding on something for the sake of truth. So that is the literal, what you can say, derivative, etymological meaning of the word Satyagraha. There is in Padma Purana a very fine verse comes in Kriya Yogasara chapter 16. Yathartha kathanam yaccha sarva loka sukha pradam. Yathartha kathanam yaccha sarva loka sukha pradam. Tat satyamiti vidnyeyam asatyam tad vipariyayam. Let me translate that, because being a Sanskrit professor, I am tempted to quote in Sanskrit. Let me translate that. So that which is beneficial to all beings, sarva loka sukha pradam, and yathartha kathanam, that which tells the truth in a matter of fact manner, without adding any interpretation, any subjectivity to that, matter of fact manner, what is stated, and that which is beneficial to all, that is called Satya. And the contrary to that is asatya, that is non-truth, untruth. So that is the definition, that is rather an explanation of the word Satya. So we have seen so many connotative meanings, the denotations and connotations of the word Satya, Agraha, and the meaning of the compounded word as such. Now how, in what manner did Gandhiji exploit this, and where from he got that energy? What is the source of this Satyagraha for him? He is not the inventor, certainly not. Okay? He has utilized this Satyagraha to gain something. He has used it as a weapon of a passive, passive resistance. It came as a passive political resistance of disobedience, and which later on turned into non-violence or ahimsa. But then where the source comes, where is his energy? That lies in Indian philosophy, which Gandhiji, worshipped. He glorified that Indian philosophy. All his ideology has come up from the Indian philosophical principles, I should say. So now Satyagraha, in this word Satyagraha, it has three basic constituents. One is Satya, truth, because you have to adhere to truth. You have to cling to it, hold on to it, what may come, what come may, okay? You have to hold it on. That is Satya, truth. There is another constituent of that is ahimsa. When you are holding on to truth, or whenever you are holding on something for the sake of truth, you have to be very, very, sympathetic to the situation, to the people around you, and therefore non-violence, ahimsa. Now again, if I go on splitting the word ahimsa, the negative particle is not just an absence. It has so many, like nayarthaha, shadarthaha. In the Mimamsa, it is said that nay, this negation, has 6 different meanings. Let me come only to the 3 of that. It could be something other than himsa, that is called ahimsa. Okay? It is something which is opposed to himsa, viruddha, that is called ahimsa, and that which is abhava, absence of himsa, is called ahimsa. So, satya, ahimsa, and the third constituent of satyagraha is tapasya. Tapasya is the austerity. Austerity, giving some type of what you can say, klesha, suffering to your own self, to gain something, to achieve something, you sacrifice something. So that self-sacrifice, that is the third inevitable constituent of satyagraha. So we come to satya, ahimsa and tapasya. This is the Trisutri. These are the 3 main constituents of the word satyagraha. And when we come to this, how Gandhiji implemented this satyagraha, truth, of course, whatever he felt is beneficial, not for himself, but for the wider community, for the people at large, he will hold on to it. So, let it be the salt satyagraha, let it be the Dandi march, whatever was beneficial for the community at large, he just held on to it. That was his satya. Now, when we come to ahimsa, ahimsa for him comes, it is symbolized in a pictorial form in the 3 monkeys. If you are familiar with the 3 monkey symbol, okay? So one is closing the eyes, one monkey is closing the ears, and one monkey is closing the mouth. So you should not listen to any bad words or harsh words. Bura mat suno, bura mat dekho, don't see any evil. So see only good in everything and everybody. Bura mat dekho and bura mat bolo, don't speak harsh words. Because ahimsa is not just hitting somebody or killing or shooting somebody, it's only a physical action. That is himsa in action. But himsa can be done by speech when you speak harsh words to others. That is subtler than what you do, as beating or striking or, shooting at somebody. That's in action. Speaking is subtler than that. And the subtlest himsa is in the mind. When you think evil of somebody, evil for somebody, that is mental himsa. So when he speaks of ahimsa, he speaks on all 3 levels. This in Sanskrit we call kaya, vacha, manasa. Kaya is bodily action, vacha is through your speech, articulation, and manasa, your thought, your feelings, your mind. So on all 3 levels, himsa should be avoided. That is the wider connotation of the word ahimsa. And then for tapasya, when it comes to tapasya, see, the best way to curb your negative feelings or your anger, the modern psychologists say that you count 1 to 10 when you are angry, right? You count 1 to 10, and by the time you count or you come till 10, your anger subsides. Better not to speak anything, maunam. Why Gandhiji had so much faith in mauna, not speaking at all? If you speak, there is a likelihood that you think of some ill of somebody, and that might get articulated through your speech. So better not speak anything. So mauna, that comes as a tapasya, the third constituent, and there is meditation for that. When you are sitting quietly without speaking anything, you are, internalizing everything. There is internalization and institutionalization. Okay? Satyagraha concept was institutionalized, but in the tapasya, the third constituent of ahimsa, you internalize, you meditate, you sit quiet, you do breathing, you don't think of anybody, or you focus on somebody, focus on something like dhyana, or basically this is absence of any emotions, absence of any thoughts is the true, pure meditative state, right? So that is self-sacrificing. I mean, you sacrifice your speech, you sacrifice your thoughts, and be yourself, quieten your, calm your mind, you know. So that is the tapasya. So these are the three constituents, and I think Gandhiji has done that throughout his life. In fact, in paradoxical statements, I would rather say that his silence was more eloquent than hundreds and thousands of words. And from that, he arrived at a stage which was very peaceful. When we speak of Gandhian principles, we always speak of peace, P capital. Now that peace comes from the adherence to Satyagraha. I again come back to Satyagraha, and then I would rather say that the first Satyagrahi is not Gandhiji. The first Satyagrahi is ancient Indian historical figure Sita. Sita from the Ramayana, I feel, and Gandhiji used to say that Sita is a true Satyagrahi. She held on to the conviction, to the truth. Yes, my Rama will come one day and release me from the clutches of Ravana or Sri Lanka, and he will take me home. And she stuck to that. She clung to that. Ravana tried to entice her with so many royal luxuries and whatnot, but she went on hunger strike. Hunger strike or fasting as a means to achieve something comes from Satyagraha, and Sita is a true Satyagrahi in that sense of the term, right? And then even in modern India, we have got so many Satyagrahis. The latest example is of Anna Hazare of Raleganj Siddhi, Ahmednagar district in Maharashtra. And just last year, 2018, he went on hunger strike for many days and achieved the non-corruption bill, which he got passed through the legislature. I mean, to get your thing, you stick on to the truth, you stick on to what you want till you get it. You don't leave it halfway. So that is the true meaning of Satyagraha for me, and for me means, according to Gandhiji, that is the true meaning. And you know, on Gandhiji there are hundreds and thousands of biographies, and there are so many words. If you just Google, you will come across thousands of sites giving you the quotations of Gandhiji and about Gandhiji. In Sanskrit, there is Gandhi Sukti Muktavali, and that is composed by some 90 verses, very terse, very difficult, tough Sanskrit, written by Chintaman Rao Deshmukh, C.D. Deshmukh, the first Governor General of Reserve Bank of India. He was a finance person, and he wrote in Sanskrit. And I would like to end my talk in this panel by a verse from his Gandhi Sukti Muktavali, a simplest verse which I could find out from his very difficult text. And there he says, see, ultimately the Satyagraha led to Ahimsa, I said, and Ahimsa led to peace. Okay, so Ahimsa stands as a between, like a mediator. On one hand there is Satyagraha, the other hand there is a peace. Okay, so he says, Ahimsa dharma tattvanam agrimam tattvam asti me. Of all the tattvas, of all the fundamental principles of dharma, the Sanatana dharma, I feel Ahimsa is the first and the foremost, agrimam, the first and the foremost principle. And second line he says, Tathai vasau mama shraddha. I have deep faith in that, I trust that Ahimsa. And he says, Jatasyantepi vidyate. It will remain with me even in my coming births, next births. So I thank you all. I think I have not exceeded my limit of 10 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So we're going to have a chance to interact with everyone for the last 20 minutes. And I want to say that I'm mesmerized by Dr. Mahulikar's scholarship and intellectual depth, and I forgot to give you the basic fact that so is India, because she, for years, was the head of the Sanskrit department and the Tagore Chair for Comparative Literature of Mumbai University. And she's currently the dean of the faculty of the Chinmaya University, Kerala. And I'm going to be watching the video of this so I can really go back and understand it. Thank you so much. So,
take the audience.
Prasad Gollanapalli, I can tell you from my personal conversations, getting to know him, that Prasad in his life embodies and practices the concepts that we were so fascinated to hear about from Professor Mahulikar. Prasad, please share your thoughts.
Good morning. It's a great honor for me to be here and share some ideas, experiences with all of you. Such an enlightened gathering here. And my context would be the Gandhian approach to solving problems. I think from the beginning of mankind, throughout there had been problems, and you need to solve. So whatever is equilibrium and whatever deviations are there, then they should be brought back to normalcy. And the society generates a lot of impurities. Like this body generates impurities, and we give a shower or we give a bath. We clean it every day. But the society also generates impurities. Are we giving a bath to that? Impurities of segregation, inequalities, economic inequalities, corruption, environmental degradation. So whatever we are seeing in this world, all the problems, how and what kind of efforts we need to do to make it a better society and a better society for the future. As it is said, we have inherited our earth from the posterity, and we need to return it in a good condition, at least in what shape we received it. So we don't have the absolute rights. So when the treatment of fellow human beings, when we have to do with respect and honor, that should be the foundation for our social being. But the world had seen a lot of injustices. So was the case in South Africa. We got a lot of South African friends here. Ila Gandhiji also is here, where the Satyagraha was born. Satyagraha was born in this context that I am talking on 9/11, September 11th, 1906 in Johannesburg. What Gandhi saw in South Africa as he went as an young barrister, there was color prejudice. And he encountered that within the first 1 week of his arrival. When he was thrown off from a first-class compartment just because he was a black or a brown. So Gandhi wrote a sentence almost immediately after his arrival into South Africa. He said, "It is a mystery to me how men can feel themselves honored by humiliating their fellow beings." And his age was 23 at the time. And it is that sentence which inspired Richard Attenborough to make a film on Gandhi. And one of the persons who acted in the film, Vivek Swarup, is here right now in this hall. So Gandhi was concerned, and his immediate reaction to solve the problem of this inequality, injustice, the segregation, color prejudice, his approach was writing letters to the editors or petitions to the government, to leading delegations. But then he realized that his words or his appeals do not touch the rulers, the Western rulers. But he was always wondering why what I am talking is so simple a truth that all human beings are equal. Why is this not reaching my opponents? So he reasons out that I am trying to reach their minds and it is not possible. Now I should reach to their hearts. That's where he started his spiritual journey in 1906. So for a thing like holding on to the truth, Satyagraha is basically non-violent resistance to injustice. In a non-violent way, we resist injustice. The world had known how to handle certain problems using violence. I have the power, I have the gun, I will handle the injustice. So one is that approach. The other approach is, how do I handle or how do I deal with this injustice in a non-violent way? And to do that, Gandhi was looking at how do I bring in a spiritual element. In 1906, in February, he started like this mauna, the celibacy, austerity, the tapas that she was talking about, the whole process of spiritual one, Gandhi adopted. So that's what has given the truth power. Can truth be a power? Gun can be a power. But can truth be a power? Can there be something like a moral power? The power of love, power of compassion? Gandhi was able to build all of that into a very indomitable power to solve a problem. Now for those who get into the power of gun, like in military or in the police, you train them. You train them for 2 years, 3 years. How to handle the guns, how to handle the other equipment, and how to make the drill and all that. And those people, you can call them the soldiers, you can call them those people who believe in non-violent change, non-violent transformation. Do they not require training? Do they not require orientation? Do they not require the sadhana, the spiritual practice? That's where Gandhi brought in the ashrams. Phoenix settlement, Ila Gandhiji runs that Phoenix settlement near Durban, and there is another in Tolstoy farm near Johannesburg. So these ashrams were meant for giving a spiritual training for satyagrahis, a non-violent resistance to injustice. But how do you train? How do you orient? Because when you say love is the instrument of social change, but how can I make love an instrument? What is the process? So should it not require training, orientation? That's the technique that Gandhi perfected. And I would like to share with you a small example or an experience. Way back when I was in the college days, I went to attend a camp, a youth camp. Tarun Shanti Sena, that is the youth wing of the Gandhian movement in India. And the leaders of the camp, the youngsters, they're all... so they collected donations in kind and set up the camp and offered food to all people. And as we finish our lunch or dinner, as we go and wash the plates, there is a small poster where you find a lot of plates thrown there with the food wasted. So the quotation or the saying there is, this could have been someone else's food. Had you not wasted the food, somebody could have eaten that, because India is a country of poverty, country of hunger. So I think the message did not go into people who attended that camp. So the organizers told them, please don't waste food. With a lot of difficulty, we mobilized the resources to set up the camp. Once they said, twice they said, but still the wastage might have slightly reduced, but not totally. When we go to the buffet station with a plate, we'd like to put as much as possible, that we want to eat this, we want to eat that. Finally, the stomach says, no, it is violence against me, stop it. Then you throw the food away. So the organizers said, yes, we failed in convincing you in the need not to waste food. So for this, we'll punish you. So if you waste food in the lunch, we will not give you food in the dinner. Is that okay? Is it okay? But they did not do that. They said, we will punish ourselves for these kind of things. So they stood at the gate. They had their own plates, and from your plate, whatever leftover food was there, they collected and they ate it. And what a surprise in the evening when we all had the meeting, over 140 people, young people from all over the country in India, not a single person was able to raise the head and look into the eyes of the organizers. They're all just sitting like this. I said, what happened? We committed a mistake, but they punished themselves for our mistakes. And what is the impact? That is the creation of the beloved community, as Dr. King says. So it is a change of heart, change of approach. There is no animosity, there is no antagonism. We are all one. Maybe I'm on the wrong side, you correct me. So it is this kind of an example is so vivid in front of my eyes, what happened in 1972. And Gandhi adopted the same kind of a technique. He never said, I hate, I dislike, I despise my opponent. He never did that. He loved his opponents. When General Smuts in South Africa puts him in prison because he was leading the Satyagraha movement, Gandhi makes a pair of sandals and then gives them to General Smuts. And General Smuts returns after using for many a summer. He returned those sandals at the time of 75th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, and says, though I had worn the sandals for many a summer, I do not know if I really deserve myself to stand in the sandals made by so great a man. And he also said, this is the beauty of Satyagraha. General Smuts says, I don't like your people, tells Gandhi. You Indians, because they never gave proper rights to Indians. They can't walk on the pavement, you can't travel in the first class compartment, a lot of restrictions. So I don't like your people, I don't care to assist them at all. But what am I to do? The Prime Minister of the country, who is opponent of Gandhi, says, what am I to do? You come and help us when we need it. Because when Satyagraha, Mahatma Gandhi was in the peak in South Africa, the rail workers and coal mine workers went on strike. And the government was in a very difficult position. And if it were to be we people, we say we just hit hard our opponent when the opponent is weak. And Gandhi withdrew the Satyagraha. When Satyagraha was in the peak, he was about to win. But when the government was in trouble, he withdrew the Satyagraha and said, I don't want to fight on your weakness. That is not Satyagraha is all about. When I'm fighting for the truth, I don't need to look to your weakness. So you come back, you take care of your problems, become energetic, come back, then I'll fight you, I won't leave you. So General Smuts says, I don't care to assist your people at all, but what am I to do? You help us in the hour of our need. and you never want victory because of our weakness, but you would like to have your victory through your own suffering, your own sacrifice. And that you never cross your self-imposed limits to chivalry. And that's what reduces us to sheer helplessness.
Helplessness.
So that is how the Gandhi's approach is not to dislike, but to bring the beloved community and bring everybody into a fold, and ultimately it is the happiness at the end of it. At the end of Satyagraha, the output is not dislikes or hatreds and things like that, but the togetherness. And even he said, even if British continue to rule the country, I have no objection, Gandhi said. Even if British do not leave India but still continue to be the rulers, I have no objection, but they should rule as the servants of the country. So these ideas are extremely clear when we look at the Satyagraha, its theory and its practice. And I think today in this world which is so much agitated by violence, the only way is promoting non-violence and taking the non-violent concept, the peace, into the minds of the young generation, so that we'll have a wonderful world ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm struck by Prasad's observation that we devote immense effort to train soldiers in how to use violence, and we can't assume that people can suddenly practice nonviolence without training and education. Even Dr. King needed education and training to understand what it was about. Today, later, we have Reverend Lawson, who's really the pioneer in nonviolence education in the United States in Nashville at the time of the original sit-ins. So it's an honor to hear from him directly. And it's also an honor to hear from Michael Nagler, because his Metta Center for Nonviolence is one of the most important centers in the United States that has for many, many years been engaged in training and educating young people and all people into the methods of nonviolence. So the mission of his Metta Center includes the initial sentence: we encourage people in all walks of life to discover their innate capacity for nonviolence and to cultivate its power for long-term transformation of themselves and the world. And I asked Michael a tough question to please try to tell us how to do that. I look forward to your thoughts.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. And I'm so happy to be with all of you. I'm going to start by recalling a moment in 2007 when I had just retired from teaching at another university. And I was walking down Bancroft, and suddenly I was struck with a realization, and I was so stunned I actually stood there for a couple of minutes thinking, oh my gosh, I can read whatever I want. For 50 years I had to prepare the next lesson, the next article. So I want to share with you an insight from each of two books, two very good books that have just come out that I've read lately. One is by my friend, Rabbi Michael Lerner. It's called Revolutionary Love. And in it, he said that as human beings, we have profound spiritual needs. And these needs are unmet by our present culture. In fact, I would go a step further, and I will go a step further with you in a minute, that they are actually thwarted. They are denied and blocked by our present culture. So this is a problem that I've been struggling with for a long, long time myself. And I think what I'm going to try to share with you today is something of an answer. Michael Lerner had this to offer, looking at it from a political lens, who said, so we have these profound spiritual needs, the right exploits them, and the left ignores them. And I think that you can't get around that because You cannot solve a spiritual problem with political means. The other book is a little handbook, free download. It really embarrassed me. My handbook is not a free download. But what can you do? I have a nonprofit to support. This is a little handbook by Daniel Hunter called Climate Resistance Handbook. Superb little book. Easily find it on the web, download it. And he has a number of really crisp images that help us understand and focus, centralize on some things. One thing, he talks about trying to influence politicians. We all know this is not very efficient. And he said, okay, it's an understatement, David, but you know what I mean. He said, a politician is like a balloon tied to a rock. You can blow the balloon a little bit to the left, you can blow it a little bit to the right, but it's not going to get you very far. If you really want progress, you have to move the rock. And the rock, in his interpretation, was public opinion, what the general public thinks is right. Even the present holder of the highest office in the land, I try not to mention his name wherever it's possible, it was something of a rock himself. He had to reverse himself on one of his cruelest enterprises recently because of public outcry. Now, what I want to add to Daniel Hunter's image is that's perfectly true, but underneath that rock, there is what I like to call bedrock. The bedrock is our controlling narrative about what we think the universe consists of, who we think we are, whether we think we have a purpose in this life. And some people have been working on this. They call this the old story, that the universe is a material, random, meaningless object, and we are doomed to competition for scarce resources and so forth. So I'm going to share with you 4 basic principles that arise for me basically from Vedanta, which I believe describe and outline the new story. But before I do, I just want to share with you another little incident. Last week I was speaking at a university in Orange County. They put me up in a hotel, so I went for a swim in the hotel pool, and then I was drying off in the men's room, and suddenly I heard like a television set or something going on. I looked around. It was the Mirror. In the Mirror, they had embedded this television image, and it was playing Fox News, and it was playing revolting propaganda about that person in the White House whom I just mentioned. And I wanted to cite one thing for you in a way of praising this person and saying why we need him so much. He said, we need a tough guy to be in that position. So this comes straight from the old story that we are separate from one another, our interests cannot be reconciled, and we need to operate against one another with force, and my benefit can be secured at your expense. So there's an ad on a billboard, you're going into town from where I live, from my community. It's an ad for real estate, and it says, our pain is your gain. So there's a text here, a message on the surface, which says, buy real estate from us right now. But there's a subtext underneath that message saying that we are so radically separate that I can make you suffer for my benefit. And that is the core belief of the old story, and leads directly to that political abuse that we saw on the Mirror in the men's bathroom in Orange County last week. So on to the countervailing story. The first principle, I believe, is that the universe has a purpose, and that's important because we are, of course, part of the universe, and that means that human life has an overriding purpose, a swadharma, which each of us has to discover and carry out for her or himself. And secondly, that purpose becomes clear, becomes obvious, the minute you look at evolution as a whole and not just material evolution of matter and energy. So let me quote here a couple of lines from my spiritual teacher, Sri Eknath Easwaran, who wrote, if we take the Gita's view, he's talking about the Bhagavad Gita, that God has become the world and mind and matter belong in the same field, we get a much loftier view of evolution, which is the eons-long rise of consciousness from pure energy until the simplest life form emerge and the struggle for increasing self-awareness begins. It's that struggle for increasing self-awareness that points us to the purpose of our life. So the third point I want to make is that the problem with our culture is, as the problem that Michael Lerner pointed to, is that it directly violates that purpose. It causes us to go backwards in evolution, and that has led us to this present disastrous dilemma with climate. However, and this is mainly, I should add, this is mainly being accomplished, if you want to look at it in a simple way, by degrading the human image. Don't want to go into detail about that because it's not fun, but if you look at advertising, of which we see, incidentally, 3,000 to 5,000 commercial messages a day, all of them are degrading our self-concept of who we are. So the fourth and final point is that, yes, because there have been other disasters of comparable magnitude, ice ages and things like that, but this one is different because we are causing this one ourselves. The good side of that is, therefore, we can cure it ourselves. And I believe this was Gandhi's fundamental message. Whatever he did, in whatever situation, whatever he was talking to, a little boy in the ashram, or the viceroy, or the coming president of India, Premier Nehru, he had one purpose in mind always, and that was to uplift the human image. You can read everything he said and did from that point of view. And I want to give you one kind of striking example of that, which will also be an example of what real toughness means. During the terrible riots that ensued around the time of partition, there was a massacre in Noakhali in Bihar, and Gandhi couldn't go there because he was just pulling off the miracle of Calcutta that Attenborough's film depicts so brilliantly. So he sent a young woman named Sucheta Tukral, I'm sorry, this is Sucheta Kripalani, and he sent her to Noakhali. Incidentally, at the time when he gave her that mission, Miraben, Madeline Slade, was there, and she protested. She said, Bapu, you can't send her there. There's a young woman by herself. They're killing, they're raping. It's a death sentence. And he called her over, called Sucheta over, and said, Sucheta, I don't believe in death. Do you? She said, no, Bapu. He said, okay, then go. She goes to Noakhali, rounds up the Hindus, the remnant after the massacre, segregates them in a relatively safe place, and they've lost everything. Homes have been destroyed, families destroyed. So she starts feeding them, worked out a way to do that, was very proud of herself, always a mistake, and waiting for Gandhi to come and pat her on the back and say, good job, Sucheta. He came and he said, no, this won't do. She said, excuse me, or however you say that in Gujarati. And he said, no, Sucheta, now is the time when they must be together. You cannot segregate them or they will never get over this. Well, that was shock number one. But brace yourself, friends. That was nothing compared to shock number two. Shock number two is stop feeding them. She said, what? They've lost everything. He said, Sucheta, they've lost everything except their dignity. Don't take that away from them. Get them some kind of work, anything. Well, look what I do, just clean up the latrines, do scavenging, anything, and let them pay for their work. And so his commitment to human dignity was inflexible and was so great that he even applied it to people in that desperate situation. And as Raihan Atyabji said, his consciousness took our consciousness and raised it to do incredible things. So that his intense focus on raising the human image spread through the environment and throughout the entire world eventually. So this has led the Meta Center to take an approach which we'll be outlining in the next session in the Cypress Room. We're going to share a film with you and also the outlines of a scheme called Roadmap. You can find that on our website, metacenter.org/roadmap. Is that right, Kim? .org, yeah, okay. And in this roadmap, we follow a procedure which also Narayan Desai followed, which is first concentrate on personal empowerment, then move out to work with your colleagues on constructive program, build the world you want, and if that has not been accepted, then move on to Satyagraha in the sense of direct resistance. It has various applications, that's one of them. And so I just want to share with you 5 steps, because I promised Jonathan I would, that form the core of that personal empowerment. And we've been developing this in a course of conversations that take place at our Hope Tank at the Meta Center. Thank you, Sandra. And here's this present form. So first recommendation, trash your TV. Do not expose yourself to the devastating, degrading imagery that is fed to us thousands of times a day in the commercial mass media. People say if I avoid violence and vulgarity in the media, there won't be anything left. So we say, good idea. That leads us to the second recommendation, which is learn everything you can about nonviolence. In itself, it is an uplifting study. It's been pointed out that in this country today, we have 20 veterans of military service of one kind or another who are committing suicide. You talk to them and they say, oh, I lost my soul in Iraq, or things like that. I no longer know who I am. On the other hand, as Paul Chappell points out, former captain in the infantry, now a peace activist, he has never known anyone to get PTSD from doing an act of love. So second recommendation, learn about nonviolence, and I'm going to add now, learn about it as it is embedded in this new story, this new paradigm of humanity. We call it new, it's 5,000 years old, but it's new to us. So the third recommendation is take up a spiritual practice. What I find meditation does for me is, on the one hand, it helps me build that pathway in my mind so that when I have a negative impulse, and yep, I have quite a few of them, thank you, it enables me to convert them into a creative, positive, nonviolent action. I'd like to share with you about 150 stories of this happening, not to myself, but time doesn't allow for that. The other thing that meditation does for one is it makes us progressively more aware of the unity of life, so that we cannot possibly accept this core principle of pop culture that my happiness can be gained and sometimes has to be secured at your expense. That becomes absolutely impossible, which of course both of these things are core foundational beliefs of nonviolence. Fourth, you'll be such a nice person after you're doing all these 3. I mean, you're nice already, but you'll be so much nicer. Why not go out and interact with people personally? You know, we have these things, iPhones, what have you, that have so isolated ourselves from one another, and that has a political dimension that takes away part of our liberty. So just make an effort. As we like to say, one good latte is worth 5 emails. Final step. Okay, you've gained all this self-knowledge. You're building a bit of loving community around yourself. Now is the time to ask, where do my particular strengths match the needs of my world? And get into action. But here again, I would add another recommendation, which is whatever you're doing, be prepared to describe why you're doing it in terms of the news story. So if somebody comes to you, as somebody did come to a friend of mine recently, who said, why do you care about those people in Central America? You should be prepared to say there's no such thing as those people. We are all one people. And here is the scientific evidence. All those 4 points that I outlined for you just now are thoroughly backed up by modern science. It's good to know that. If you take a look at our table out there, you will see that one of the sections of our website is called The Science of Nonviolence. I heartily recommend that. So I hope we'll see you in the Cypress Room shortly and share with you our film and how it fits into a major project to uplift nonviolence in the world.
Thank you so much.
Yes, welcome, Jonathan. Thank you.
Michael is very modest, so I'm going to plug his new book, which is The Third Harmony, Nonviolence, and the New Story of Human Nature, which is what he was describing. It's coming out soon, is that right?
March.
It's coming out in March, so
Yeah.
probably you can pre-order it on Amazon if you don't look at the ads.
Yeah. You can also pre-order it with us.
Oh, you can pre-order it with Michael.
And I'll give you your money later, Jonathan. Thank you.
And I have to say, personally, I'm inspired by all three of our speakers very much. I'm going to work hard on getting rid of the TV. Netflix is going to be a little bit more difficult, but I'll try my best. So we only have 10 minutes officially. We have all day to personally interact. So I'd like to have people who want to raise a question and let me know whether it's for a particular panelist or for all the panel. At least we can try to have a couple short questions before 10. Who'd like to jump in? Please. And please introduce yourself.
Very fortunate to host Gauri from India. She's staying with us. This question for the two professors. So the Gita, you mentioned the Gita. In the Gita, there is this notion of duty, and the notion of duty.
Mm-hmm.
And Krishna encourages Arjuna to proceed with the path, obviously of violence, violent path, because it's the right karma, the right duty at that point in time. Exactly the opposite of the ahimsa principle. And I just wonder if you guys are coming in, you have studied these far more than I have, whether there was an opportunity for Krishna to adopt an ahimsa approach to the Mahabharata, the greatest battle in the history of the Just a question about how do you reconcile?
It's for me or for Michael? For both.
Gauri.
Yeah, I mean, many people ask this question, why Krishna is propagating himsa by inspiring Arjuna to tato yuddhaya yujjasva, and tasmad yuddhyasva kaunteya, etc. There are two sides of this. See, when we are talking about non-violence and resisting with the passive tool of Satyagraha and non-violence, which has come in the 20th century, this is a very modern perspective to ahimsa. See, ahimsa, wherever it can be, ahimsa can be diverted, you can adopt ahimsa. But the situation where ahimsa cannot be diverted at all, where the violence cannot be annihilated at all, because there were attempts for ahimsa, even in the Mahabharata, right? There where the Krishna himself went as an ambassador to ward off the war and all the calamities, But then Duryodhana didn't listen to that. So it's not that at the initial stage Krishna is asking Arjuna to fight and kill all the Kuru dynasty. It's not that. There has been attempt, but then all attempts fell. Then there is no other go but to kill. That is one side of that. The other side, as Mahabharata itself says, Yato dharmastato jayaha. Where there is dharma, there is victory. So dharma always is victorious. And when you compare the two sides of the Kauravas and the Pandavas is the dharma side and the Kauravas is the adharma side, because they have done all wrongs throughout their lives. And therefore that adharma has to be uprooted at some cost. If not by Dautya, if not by peaceful treaty. See, Pandavas were happy to live with 5 small villages. And then Duryodhana said, I will not part with a land which can rest on the tip of a needle. Even that I am not going to part with in my kingdom. So when all attempts fail, it was Himsa. So that is my take on it.
Thank you, Gauri. That was just perfect. But I'd like to just add a couple of things. If you read, especially chapters 2 and 3, you cannot come away still thinking that this poem is about a physical battle.
Yeah,
and then in chapter 8, Mam Anusmara Yudhyacha. Still your mind in me and then take up the battle cannot possibly mean a battle against others. It's a battle against the evil in yourself. And it's perfectly clear in the Gita, though it was written composed at a given time when people, they couldn't quite accept it literally, is in the allegorical way. And then secondly, just to enlarge a little bit, Gauri, on what you said, Gandhi himself said, if a madman with a sword is ranging through the village, the person who dispatches that lunatic will have done himself, the village, and the lunatic a favor. It is always a critical part of my nonviolence course, because at this point we enter the real world and things get a little gray and fuzzy and my students are very unhappy. But he said there are 3 things that have to be accomplished in order for this to stay an act of dharma, an act of nonviolence. 1, of course, we're talking about an emergency in which you have no recourse. You cannot persuade that person, though there are some stunning examples of this having happened also, like what David did in Virginia. So the first thing is you have to be doing it not out of anger or fear, to the extent that's humanly possible, but out of a sense of duty and a need to protect others and the attacker. That's the most important thing, very challenging. Secondly, if any injury comes to you in the course of doing this, no whining. You're not to complain, hey, I'm trying to follow my dharma and I got hurt, this isn't fair. Come on, cut it out. Third, and perhaps the most important part is, do not prepare to use violence to defend yourself or others. Because if you have time to prepare, you should have prepared non-violently. So for example, let's say after 9/11, I don't mean 1906, I mean 2001, and I'm not getting into the question of who actually caused that, that after 9/11, one thought was have every airplane pilot armed in the cabin. That'll help you. You see. So if you must never draw that conclusion. The conclusion you must draw is, where did we go wrong to have such a situation arise in our society? Why are we having so many deaths, so many gun homicides in this country? I am now going to dedicate at least part of my time until this problem is solved. That's the response that you should come away with. So 1, no anger or fear, no whining, and no drawing the raw conclusions.
One quick follow-up. This is a deep discussion. Gandhi and King, in different ways, said that do not use violence. Violence is morally wrong. And cowardice is even worse.
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah. So in the extreme situation where you're going to choose cowardice, there might be circumstances when violence is preferable. But
physical violence, at least. Harm.
Yeah. So both of them said, address these issues. Do not use violence, but cowardice is worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I don't have to choose cowardice. It comes to me of its own accord.
But we have one person here. Okay, here, with everyone's permission, because we had such a rich panel, our next session is at 10:30. Can we end at 10 after 10? Okay, so one in the back, 2, 3, 4, and as quick as possible.
Hello? Is this working? Yeah. My name is Perry Garfinkel. I'm a journalist. I write for the New York Times, and I just signed a contract to write a book called Being Gandhi, my year-long experiment following the Mahatma's moral principles in these immoral times. I was especially intrigued, Dr. Mahulikar.
Yes.
I loved your etymological explanation of Satyagraha. However, I have an existential question. Given your definition, how can you hold on to truth when it's eternally changing?
Yeah. We hold on to truth which is unchangeable. Satya is unchangeable truth. I distinguish between Satya and Rita. Rita is that which is moving, that which is fluctuating, that's in a flux, not Satya. Satya is the static. Satya is the universal. Satya is from the root us, to exist. So that which exists, the matter of fact, that is Satya. That is not changing. Rita is changing. So we can't hold on to that which is changing. We can hold on to that which is there universally, stable and secure for all the times to come. It's in fact, like in Shankara Bhashya, it has been defined as Trikala Badhitatvam Nama Satyam. That is what does not change in all three times, past, present and future. That is called Satya.
Thank you. Who is number 2? Yes. And please stand up and introduce yourself.
I'm just married to her. That's my claim to fame.
And your name is?
Zia Yusuf. So if we could bring this into contemporary times, first of all, thanks for the comments. What's an example of a successful nonviolent movement in your mind that's taking place today, or where should there be one? And what is the criteria for that? Is it you need a charismatic leader like Gandhiji or Martin Luther King? Is it something that has to be really terrible to motivate people? Is it the number of people? What's happening in contemporary times?
Thank you. Just to preserve time, I would like each of our panelists to give one example that is compelling to you. Would you like to start, Prasad?
That is in the modern context.
Modern context of the successful application of Satyagraha.
Today, the climate change issue which is being talked about, Krishna from this way, the kind of young people's movement is one of the greatest example I could see in the present day world. Yeah. How do we protest non-violently and bring to the attention of the whole world?
Thank you.
I think I would talk about Sudan, not South Sudan, but Sudan. They had a long-term uprising, got a really brutal dictator out of the way, and unlike what happened in Egypt and other Arabic countries, they managed to work out a compromise with the military such that there's going to be a transition to civil government. In order to do that, they had to undergo a lot of suffering without retaliation. And you ask, what is my criterion for a successful nonviolent episode? I would say it's a long-term permanent change in the hearts of the former opponents, first of all, but also in the structures of society.
Thank you, Gauri.
I would like to give you one example of sticking to the Gandhian principle, especially of ahimsa. I would rather refer to the Chipko Andolan in India. Chipko Andolan is very unique, and that was to save the trees from being felled or cut down. And it was led by Sundarlal Bahuguna, and he and his followers just cling to the trees, the trunk of the trees, embrace the trees so that nobody would come and fell them down. So these are there, you know.
Thank you. We could do a whole session on the contemporary examples, but thank you for your question. Yes, please.
I'm Raj Oza, and along with consulting on organizational change, I help the MBA students here in a course called Touchy Feely to help them with their interpersonal dynamics. Perhaps in response to the question around a successful nonviolent movement, Jonathan, thank you for your nonviolent movement of the dialogue, the truth talk amongst the panel. I've recently written a book called Satyagraha, Truth Talk, a Gandhian guide to postmodern dilemmas that we all have. The question I have is for you, Michael. So you mentioned trash TV. Perhaps that's a redundancy.
Which one?
Trash your TV. Yeah.
So
Trash your TV.
can you connect that to the Gandhian Swaraj, the self-rule that we require, or yourself, Gauri, because you're so good with those portmanteaus. So the self-rule that's required and the benefits of Swaraj.
Yeah, so Gandhi was accused of appropriating a spiritual term, Swaraj, for a political purpose. And he said, guilty as charged. I did it purposely. And the connection is that external Swaraj has to emanate from personal Swaraj. Now, what we have failed to understand so drastically in the West is that the freedom that we really seek is freedom from our own negative impulses. So, you know, the desire to watch all of this lurid stuff and get excited about it is a negative drive, which you have to recognize and renounce. But don't forget, I also stress the positive component, you know, not watching TV, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, TV is the 1960s, right? Now it's other media. If you're not doing that, you've created a lot of free space in your mind. So fill that with nonviolence in the new story. And your freedom will inevitably express itself as political freedom, because if people can't compel you, if they threaten you and you don't respond, they have no power over you.
Thank you. Yes.
My name is Sid Shom, and I was a grad. My name is Sid Shom, and I was a grad student, and I worked with Professor Carson at the King Institute. So my question is, what is the role of legal and legislative action in nonviolence?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What is the role of legal and legislative action in nonviolence? Because I think Gandhi was kind of skeptical of legal and nonviolent action, legal and legislative action, because it involved the coercive power of the state. But on the other hand, King pushed for legislative action, like the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. And so, how do you see that?
Good question. Who'd like to say?
You handle it because you're from the legal background.
I have a thought that I wanted. Does anyone want to jump in?
You do yours first.
So that's fascinating. I can't speak to the Gandhi side, and our colleagues can do it. But, you know, as you know from this incredibly powerful text, the letter from Birmingham jail, 1963, King was very, very upset because he opened the newspaper when he was in jail, and there was a published letter from the clergy, liberal clergy, saying, please don't agitate, please go home. Direct action is making things worse. Leave it to us. We're liberals, and we can negotiate a good solution and an agreement. And it made him very angry. He said, you don't understand. He said, you say, why don't we turn to negotiation? The entire purpose of direct action is negotiation. That's what he says, okay? because we need to create the pressure to show the tensions in society that exist, expose them, and from that pressure, we're going to be able to sit at the negotiating table and have power and influence that we never could have without the direct action. And the purpose of the negotiation is to create a solution, solve the problem, reach an agreement at the local level and then eventually at the national level through, for example, 1964 Civil Rights Act, 1965 Voting Rights Act. So it was always, in King's mind, geared to create the pressure towards solutions, and he believed, voting registration was a key element of it, and the voting rights process was a key element because voting is power in a democracy. So he very much wanted to work within the system by creating that pressure. After he made those achievements, he didn't stop. He kept on going and never would stop.
I'll try to add two quick things to that, Jonathan. One, in addition to reminding everyone that Gandhi was a lawyer, if you look at our website, we have a model called the escalation curve, and we divide the escalation of conflicts into 3 stages. The first stage, you can talk to people, you can negotiate with them. The second stage, they're not listening to you. And this is precisely the procedure that Gandhi followed. He used a lot of constitutional methods to get things to change first, even though he thought it wouldn't work, and he was right. If it doesn't work, then you go to Satyagraha, and I'm reminded that when King came to LBJ and said we need a Voting Rights Act, LBJ said, that's a good idea, now go out and make me do it. So that's the first stage. The second stage is Satyagraha, and the third stage, when it has to happen, is when even the Satyagraha hasn't influenced your opponent, hasn't led to the persuasion that you're after, you have to be ready to renounce your life. Often that will we hope we won't even get there, but if we do, it can have a magical effect. And it's actually much safer than trying to protect yourself with weapons. But that's an extreme. But I think those 3 stages, been looking over and over again, I think they obtain in any long-term campaign.
I want to come back and one more comment to this question. So, as everyone remembers, over these last years, we've had a number of movements in the United States. For example, the students following the Parkland shooting. That's another incredibly powerful example. But their goal was to create pressure for legislation. Okay, but we had other movements. For example, the Occupy movement. Okay, the Occupy movement had a different strategy, a different philosophy. They did not adhere to the Kingian philosophy. They did with regard to nonviolence. But they made a policy, we will not negotiate with anyone because we don't recognize the legitimacy of any governmental institutions, because they reached back to the lineage of anarchism. Okay? King was completely against that. He wanted to work with the tools of society and use the tools of nonviolence and the method of nonviolence to change society, not to say we're going to start a new society and let it grow and just ignore the fact that we have power structures. Not at all. And I believe personally that that's one of the reasons that the Occupy movement was not a successful movement. So, and I think there's competition in many outstanding and important nonviolent movements between those 2 traditions. And I think the Gandhi and Kingian tradition is a powerful tradition that does include that element. So, because it's 10 after, I want to say a couple concluding things, and then we'll have a chance to talk with our guests individually. So, one thing, I was very struck by the spiritual element in all 3 of our speakers, and this concept of the understanding and appreciation of the unity of life so permeated Gandhi and King. King talked about the network of mutuality, and that once you understand that network of mutuality, you really have no choice but to regard each person as with dignity, and you can't humiliate them or degrade them. And that's so connected. And it comes from both of these great spiritual teachings and leaders, both from the Vedanta tradition and the Christian tradition and the Judeo-Christian tradition. And I'm also thinking about this concept of holding fast to the truth, which I find very beautiful, which echoes King's Birmingham jail speech. And when I personally watch this young girl, Greta Thunberg, if you see her, this is a person who understands Satyagraha because she holds fast to the truth. She has an advantage that many of us don't have, which is that she has autism. Okay? Because people who have autism are able to say, I'm going to ignore social norms, all the noise around me, and I'm going to stick with what I know is true. Okay? If you have the capacity, in addition, to be high functioning. Okay? But those of us who are, quote, neurotypical, we have to work harder to do it. But I want to thank our guests because I was inspired by each one of our guests. Thank you so much. That was great. Oh, good.